shout. Tune in, feel the energy ignite. Rise and grind, take flight. Hey, feel the unity, the pride's electrified. There, under the stadium lights, where legends thrive. Every touchdown will close the clock west. In Detroit we stand. Get down there. Rise and grind, Detroit's calling out. Football dreams in every shout. Tune in, feel the energy ignite. Oh, rise and grind, take flight.
Okay, we're going to give it a shot here. We can technically call it a morning show since we started at 11:59 a.m. But hey, welcome into Rockhound Detroitlions. We're going to do a short afternoon version of this morning show that did not happen. So I think we got things fixed. I think we're okay, but we'll see how long that lasts. So as you guys knew this morning, I wanted to get into a little bit more of free agency stuff and just kind of focusing on one position at a time and just kind of walking through who's available and what maybe makes sense. And when we look at, the Lions team for 2025, it's going to look vastly different. It's just going to. I don't think that there's any way to get around the fact that we're going to have a lot of guys moving on and some new faces coming in. I mean, that's just the theme of every NFL season. That's just the way that it is. The Lions have been doing a great job at building solid depth and guys that can last on this roster, for 3, 4, 5 seasons that don't have to be starters. And it's those depth pieces that I feel are the most important. Starters you can find. Doesn't mean that they're going to be top-tier starters, but you can find starters. It's just how much do you want to pay. So I will do a little bit of linebacker talk today and why I feel that may be the weakest link. Now, some people may think that there's another positional group that is the weakest link, but this is for multitude of reasons. But we'll get into that in just a moment. I still want to start with NFL news, but do me a favor, put something in the chat. Let me know that you're in because obviously we're starting all over, so all of this morning's chat is no good. It looks like we got 2 in there already, so you guys can see it. Let me know if the video looks good, if the audio is good, because I had to do a lot of changes today with how I'm doing things. All right, we got a few more people in. Perfect. Let all your friends know that we're doing it. Everyone that's normally in today or this morning, I understand they may not be able to be in for the afternoon show. Could be at work or whatever you're doing. It'll at least be here later. So 1 second here. All right, so first thing I wanted to start with, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of chatter about the Chiefs and about the refs. So much so that there's even a petition going around right now to boycott the NFL because of what has been going on with the Chiefs. So let me open up this article. I found it this morning as we were getting prepared. So NFL fan launches a petition to boycott the league over the referee treatment of the Chiefs and claim, quote, it's important for democracy. Give me 1 second. I'm going to actually try to bring this in, but I got to turn off my ad blocker. Let me try to bring this in and kind of show you guys what we're talking about here. This is, by the way, this is from Fox News that I saw this morning. Of course, we got to make a slight adjustment here. All right, here we go. So anyway, fan launches a petition to boycott the league over the referee handling of the Chiefs or the treatment of the Chiefs. Goes on to say that a Virginia man named Mac Donahue has started a petition on change.org calling for football fans to boycott the NFL over the recent officiating. Donahue is calling the league to introduce rigorous referee training and accountability mechanisms in response to suspected favoritism by the referees towards the Kansas City Chiefs, which has become a hot talking point for fans this season. Quote, a growing concern over the inconsistent refereeing, particularly evident while observing games involving the Kansas City Chiefs, is tarnishing this beautiful sports spirit. The aggravation has reached a point where many of us are contemplating boycotting not just the Super Bowl, but all future games until there is significant change. This is what Mr. Donahue has proffered to the NFL. Now, I will say this, the NFL is not scared one bit. I think it's hilarious that we're doing petitions. We did one last year, I think it was, or the year before. It was not this last season, it was the season before after the Dallas game. And what we thought was the fixing against the Detroit Lions for the 2-point conversion to Taylor Decker that apparently wasn't. So I get it. You know, I understand this fan's disdain for the NFL and the officiating. I mean, the officiating's been a problem. So I do want to highlight a few things. Let me get out of this screen. I do want to highlight a few other things that I came across for today's show, and that involves Rich Eisen. So on Rich Eisen's show, he had Mike Florio on. He also had Julian Edelman on, both talking about the same thing, but from different perspectives. You have the Chiefs' favoritism that Julian kind of, I mean, he puts a light on it that maybe has some weight to it. He says a few things that make sense, but at the same time, I don't think you can really ignore the fact that the Chiefs have had this overly aggressive favoritism by the refs. And then we're going to hear from Mike Florio, and he actually has a good point. And it's something that we've discussed before. You know, at what point are they going to get rid of this archaic way of first downs? I mean, there's technology that's out there. Why not use it? So I'm going to bring both of those in. We're going to listen to the audio. They're about 4 or 5 minutes apiece. I'll break it up in the middle and talk about it. But first, let's get into Julian Edelman first, I think. I think we'll go there. All right, Julian Edelman on Rich Eisen.
So, Julian, watching these playoffs and hearing that the Chiefs have favor, okay, potentially from a certain striped wearing individual. I'll be honest, Julian, I've heard this story before of a dynastic team being a dynastic, but people not maybe giving them the full flowers they deserve because they think there's a thumb on the scale in their favor with the referees. Would you happen to know which dynasty I might be referring to in that regard, Julian Edelman? You want to take a guess who that would be?
Yeah. The Steelers?
No, not going that far back. Yours.
Oh.
Yours. That Brady... Oh, all you got to do is breathe on him. Anybody else gets taken down, you know, and there's no penalty. Brady gets breathed on. If you get touched, if Julian Edelman gets touched, here comes the flag. Your guys could just be draped all over everybody, and there's no flag. This doesn't sound familiar to you at all? Not at all.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, but it's apparent when you're on top, everyone wants to try to bring you down. It's a bunch of baloney. Nice. That the league is helping the Kansas City Chiefs. If you got a problem with it, go beat them. Okay, the refs aren't involved in when you throw interceptions, when you fumble the ball, when you jump off sides, when you don't convert third down or fourth down or third and fourth down for short 4 times. They can't control that. Like, if you want to beat them, go beat them. Don't talk about it. Be about it. I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say that about the Chiefs.
Did you? And you did hear that, though.
You don't know. He's the face of the league. Okay, if it's close and you have to think about it, just stop. Okay, you got to do business as business is being done with the referees. We all have scouting reports on each ref crew on how they like to throw the game. You learn about it during that first part of that game. If they're calling it tight, you tighten back. If they're not, you just hope that they're consistent throughout the whole thing, which they usually are. And yes, they miss calls and they do these things and there's bad calls here and there, but you know, there's a handful of roughing the passers for guys that don't even have a resume that you looked at this year that got the call. If it's close, leave it alone. Yeah, they'll probably have to address that sideline awareness stuff, but you know, these whole graphics about, they get the call and they don't get the call. They don't give the call to them because they're coached better.
Julian Edelman here on the Rich Eisen Show, everybody. So when you're watching these Chiefs, how do they remind you of you and your teams back in the day, Julian?
They're situationally tight. You watch them on third down. You watch them in the red area. You know, a lot of these games, when you get to this time of the year, they're not won by the team that makes the most plays. Yeah, that's part of it. It's usually the team. Well, it's always the team that makes the least amount of mistakes, and that's what they do. They play mistake-free. They play situationally tight, and they lull you to sleep, and then they beat you when they need to. And that's stuff that we used to do. So, you know, it's been fun to watch them because, you know, hey, that's how football is supposed to look. A lot of these teams that are sloppy, penalties, turnovers, abandoning their run game when things get tough, trying to go for 2-point conversions in the second quarter, like that's you. That ain't them. That's you.
So how did you guys approach the game in a manner, and obviously it helps to have folks like you and Belichick and Brady, Gronk, I get it. But how do you think knowing what you guys did, Mahomes wasn't maybe yet really Mahomes, but you're part of one of only two teams to go into Arrowhead and beat Mahomes. What do you think the Eagles can affect based on what you were able to do back in the day, Julian? If there's any connective tissue here that could be drawn.
I think they got to do what got them to this point in the season. They're going to have to establish a run. It's very apparent that when that run game goes, it opens up everything else.
Okay, so the rest of that is him just projecting what he feels is going to happen in this upcoming game. And so I'm going to wind it all the way back here. So great point. He says, you know, if just go beat him, right? It's the old saying. You want to beat the best, or you want to be the best, you have to beat the best. And so he says, just go beat him. It's a fair point. But then he also talks about, you know, penalties and not converting on third down or third and short or fourth and short or whatever it is. And then getting the scouting reports on the refs. And you should have a good idea of how these refs are going to call the game. And then you have to pay attention to that early in the game. And if they're calling it one way, then you have to dial back your aggressiveness or whatever it is you're doing that is putting you in a position of catching a flag. I get it, right? If you're committing penalties and you're not converting on third and fourth downs, and it's not due to the refs, you know, keeping you from converting, like if it's third and short, and then all of a sudden you get a 5, a 10, a 15-yard penalty, whatever it is, and then it puts you too far back to be able to convert or whatever, or makes it too difficult, then yeah, I would understand why fans would be pissed off if that kept happening to teams. But here's why Edelman is full of crap, or baloney, like he says, right? And I think Eric pointed it out in the chat too. Edelman was on a gifted team, a team that also was compared to the Chiefs, a team that was also blessed by the refs, a team that also, I mean, the tuck rule and everything else that happened. How about the deflated footballs? I mean, there was so much that went on with the Patriots. And the Patriots were great for football business. And it always seemed like they had the benefit of the doubt. And I think the thing that irks us the most about Patrick Mahomes is he's right. If you look at the dude the wrong way, you're going to get a 15-yarder. If Mahomes flops and acts like something happened, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt and get the flag. Those are the things that burn us the most. And those are the penalties that I feel need to be reviewed. So I think that there's a definite way you can get beyond this. And that is every 15-yard penalty must be reviewed. I think that's first and foremost. Every 15-yard penalty must be reviewed. He said something else that resonated. You know, it's saying that the Chiefs are situationally tight. They make the least amount of mistakes. You know, the Lions this season, we made a lot more mistakes than we normally do. A lot more, jumping off sides. Like, that usually doesn't happen for our offense. We don't do that. False starts, right? We don't do that very often. It happened a lot more this season, or at least it seemed to. Or at least it happened in critical situations. But being situationally tight, that's situational awareness, right? It's situational football. in knowing where to be, what to do, what play to call when you get into a situation. You're ready to go. You've trained this, you're prepared for it, and the Chiefs are situationally tight, meaning they know what they're doing. They're well coached. I think the Lions are too, right? And this is not about the Lions. I'm just kind of throwing them into this. But he also said abandoning the run game. So teams that start abandoning the run game, abandoning what works. The Lions have been doing it all season. Abandoning what works, especially in the last game. Gibbs is averaging 14.5 yards per carry for like the first 9 carries or whatever it was, first 4 or 5 carries. And we go away from it. Dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. But then he also said this, Rich Eisen, he said the Patriots are one of 2 teams to beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Well, the Lions beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Does that mean that the Lions and the Patriots are the only 2 teams to beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead? I can't believe that. That can't be right. Are they really that good at home? I guess I haven't paid attention to it. So, all right. That's the first part. Let's hear what Edelman is talking about, right? And now I want to get into the second part, which is Mike Florio, because this kind of goes into this whole petition thing that, this guy wants to boycott the NFL because of the favoritism. But there's another component to this, which is just a very simple way of getting rid of the archaic way of doing football. And let's talk about that next. Here we go. Mike Florio on Rich Eisen. As soon as I can figure out which button's which. Here we go.
First blush reaction to the AFC Championship game victory by the Chiefs over the Bills is what, Mike?
Well, it's that 4th down stop that could have changed everything. There was still a lot of time left in the game. We don't know what would have happened after that, but if the Bills had finished that drive when they were holding a 22-21 lead, they get the touchdown. Let's say they go for 2 and make it a 2-score game, which I think Sean McDermott would have been tempted to do because you got to kill the beast decisively. You can't just nick it, and he's learned that the hard way in the past. That play exposes so many flaws with the way the NFL does things by way of measurement for a first down. They're still using the same technology, i.e. none at all, that was put in place in 1921 after they had the meeting at the Hupmobile dealership when they decided 2 sticks, 10 yards of chain link, and the bare naked human eye, augmented by this weird mating ritual that happens when the 2 officials on opposing sides of the field, the line of scrimmage, on a short yardage play, each guy picks his spot, and then they move toward each other, and one of them defers to the other. One becomes the alpha, one becomes the beta, and in this case, if the guy, and it's Jeff Seaman who was on the far side of the field, if Patrick Holt, the guy who had the spot that was short, had deferred to Seaman, who had the spot that was first down, if it had just flipped, they get a first down there. That's as simple and basic as these decisions are made, devoid of any technology. And I think we all, every stakeholder in the game of football, fans, media, everyone needs to say, no excuses. No, well, this won't work because of this. This won't work because of that. We need more time. It should have happened already. There needs to be a fully digital embrace that tells them where the ball is when it's in the middle of a scrum like that. No more human eye. Let's go digital and let's know where the ball is. It needs to happen. The stakes are too high. The money is too significant. The gambling is too prevalent to not do it. I was going to say yesterday, but 2 days ago. It needed to be in place for that play.
So I never really thought I'd have a Marlon Perkins reference in the history of the Rich Eisen show, but calling a mating ritual here, I'm going to date myself. A very. This
is not Animal Planet.
That's what I'm saying. No. Wild Kingdom, is what Wild Chiefs Kingdom. Certainly on top of it, since so many people come to the table right now thinking that the Chiefs have a thumb on the scale in their favor. And so I ask, is this going to be this year's version of, say, the missed pass interference penalty in the NFC Championship game between the Rams and the Saints, or the overtime game between the Chiefs and the Bills in which Josh Allen didn't touch the football? Is this going to be this year's postseason version of let's address it right here, right now in the upcoming owners meeting? Do you think this will actually happen? How close are we to the technology here being used?
I think the difference this time around is it wasn't so glaringly obvious as it was in those other cases that change needed to be made. And also, this time around, the mechanism is already in place with optical tracking technologies that the league talked about last year. Sports Business Journal had an interview with Donna Ponte, the chief administrative officer for the NFL, March 1 of last year, that they're testing it out. They're developing it. I think the message moving forward is put this thing into high gear, hyperdrive. We got to get this in place. We can't have more moments like this where when it's all unbundled, and it's amazing there was no pool report that would have featured an interview between one reporter, a designated reporter, and Clete Blakeman, the referee, just to get an explanation of what happened and why. There was nothing. That only adds, of course, to the tinfoil hat wearing crowd who thinks everybody's in on the conspiracy, including the reporters. But I think this is the sign that they need to accelerate the embrace of technology, whatever it costs, whatever it takes. We've got the money, we've got the technology, we have to do it because there's too many people out there who are going to supply their own narrative if we can't supersede their narrative with facts.
Okay, so a lot mentioned here, and I think that this is a very good start for the NFL if this actually does happen. But he mentions a few things in here that I think that we are all thinking about, right? And I think that it's created a big narrative, a big problem for fans, especially in these high-stake football games. But he mentions, the betting component. There's billions of dollars that are being bet every single season on the NFL, and hundreds of millions probably in some of these football games every weekend. And just one simple thing like this, where he's talking about, one's an alpha male and one's a beta male, and, Holt has the line right, but he concedes to the guy that has the ball, placed behind the line to gain. And it's that simple mistake. It's that simple issue. I mean, that's a huge swing. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars probably in the betting world. Huge swing. Probably for the favor of Vegas. I can almost bet in the favor of Vegas. Now, again, is that done by purpose? Did that ref have some ponies in the race? Did the call come from upstairs? Hey, that's not a first down. I know that they reviewed it and they upheld it. But to think, this, what he calls a mating ritual, and then the archaic way of doing this, which is no technology at all, that back in 1920, they grabbed two sticks and a chain, and that's how it started. Now it's come a little bit of a ways since then. But, man, we have pylon cameras and lasers. And, Next Gen Stats has been around for a while. There's all these sensors and shoulder pads and helmets and footballs. They have the tech, and he just said it. They have the tech. It's in beta testing already. It's something that they've been talking about. Why is it not on the field? And why have they not been using it on the field this season? If you're going to beta test it, you might as well beta test it in a live game. So it just doesn't make the NFL look good, right? It further creates more posturing by fans that this is just all a scam, that this is just the WWE. It's all scripted. Why are we wasting our time? And that's why, again, this guy from Virginia is so pissed off because he feels like nothing's being done. And there's too many people out there that are losing, tons of money. Well, it's your own fault if you're betting and losing, but you expect things to go right. You expect that the refs are going to do the right thing, make the right call. They are human. There's always going to be a human element to that. And I can forgive refs for a human error. But things like this are egregious. And we've seen it time and time and time again. So, again, I will say that I think a few things would clear up a lot of these issues that we're seeing on the field. Number one, any 15-yard penalty, not just a helmet-to-helmet, looking for an ejection or infraction. It's any 15-yard penalty should be reviewed, right? Any of these quarterback hits, they need to be quarterback slides, just like what happened with Mahomes. That stuff needs to be reviewed in the game versus the Texans. And they would clearly see that nothing happened and reverse that call. And damn well they saw it at, the Sky Judge or whatever in New York. They saw it. It takes a simple a simple message down to the ref that, hey, that's not a penalty. Pick up the flag. Totally changes the landscape of these games. So I have to say that I am in agreement, with a lot of these things that they're discussing. Now, Edelman, I'm in agreement with half of what he said. I think that he was on a team that obviously also received the enjoyment or benefit of the refs, giving them calls that they didn't deserve, calls that didn't happen. Does it happen to every team? Yeah, it does. But obviously, this is the 90-10 rule here. It's happening 90% for the Chiefs and 10% for their opponent. But on some of the things that Edelman said, I mean, look, if you want to beat the best or be the best, you got to beat the best, right? Well, you know what? Sometimes teams come and they play their best football and they put forward their best effort, and the refs totally derail them. And you can't do anything about that. But what you can do something about, don't fumble the ball. Don't throw an interception. Don't jump offside. No false starts. No delay a game. But then again, what I will say is we've been taught from a very young age that every action has a reaction. So when something happens early in the game that now derails your progress, right? The way that you saw the game, you had a vision for the game, you had a plan for the game, and now there's a few calls that are starting to steer you left as opposed to right. Well, now you might have to sit back and rear back and throw that ball a little bit more instead of handing it off. So now you've changed the way that you were going to play this game and use your game plan. And now that has led to more opportunities for fumbles, interceptions, sacks, whatever. Every action has a reaction. I am not numb to that. I see it even in the last game that we played. A lot of stupid, calls not called. Bad penalties not called. And that put the Lions into a situation. But again, I'm not blaming the refs for everything, but they had a hand in it. So why not move into this next part, this next article that I had found talking about the worst calls, most devastating calls for each team in the history of that team. And so obviously all 32 teams are on here. Let's see what's at the top here. Most devastating call. 1 of 33. That happens to have Sean Payton in the picture. And this is the no call in the 2018 NFC Championship game. So here is the step-by-step process that they use to kind of evaluate every team's devastating call. 1, the call had to have come in a loss, or the no calls were eligible to be included, right? The stakes of the call weighed heavily. Most of the calls were made in playoff games, and many of them were made in Super Bowls, or the call also needed to have a big impact on the game. 3 regular season calls were picked, though the teams that had regular season calls picked have had playoff calls go against them. The regular season calls were so historically bad that they won out in this case. When deciding between the 2 calls that had similar stakes, they almost always chose the call that they found to be the worst. In other words, sometimes I was choosing between a clearly bad call and somewhat questionable call, and they usually chose the call that was clearly a bad call. So we'll start with this one. Arizona Cardinals, the missed block in the back on Harrison's TD run. So the video of the block occurs at the 25-second mark. I'm not going to play the video. But 2 enormous calls went against the Arizona Cardinals in this Super Bowl. Both were close calls that this individual wouldn't categorize as egregious mistakes, but the magnitude of the calls ensured that one had to be picked for this article. So Santonio Holmes' toe tap, well, that catch late in the 4th quarter essentially won the game for the Steelers. And most believe it was a legal catch. But did he ever get his right foot down? The call on the field was a catch, and there was no evidence to overturn it. The choice for the slide, or this slide, which they're talking about, which I'm not going to show, had almost the same magnitude, but realistically could have been seen by the refs. And then during James Harrison's interception return, Lamar Woodley blocked Tim Hightower at the Arizona's 25-yard line. Woodley attempted to push Hightower's shoulder, but it looks like his left hand got more of the back than the shoulder, and that was an illegal block in the back. Had it been called, the halftime score would have been 10-7 instead of 17-7, and then the Cardinals went on to lose to 27-23. So that touchdown that was not called back for a block in the back could have helped them win that game. I won't go through all of them. I'm going to share this in the chat so you guys can check it out after I get off. Some interesting stuff in here. You had the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen was ruled short on the 4th down call. Well, I think we know when that just happened. It just happened this weekend. Again, how about the Chicago Bears 84-yard Peyton run called back? 84-yard Peyton run called back. This is way back in the day. This was the 1979 wild card round. The Bears led the Eagles 17-10. Walter Payton took a handoff 84 yards to the woodshed. Down to the 1 yard line. And had that play stood, he surely would have scored moments later to give Chicago a commanding 2-score lead. But instead, wide receiver Brian Beschnagel was called for illegal motion. In the replay, you can see the Beschnagel, I think that's how you pronounce his name, had come into frame right before the ball is snapped. He is motioning parallel to the line of scrimmage and then coming toward the ball. This type of motion is used constantly today and never called a penalty. Interesting. How about the Cincinnati Bengals? Wilson called for a holding in the Super Bowl against the Rams. Or the Cleveland Browns bottle gate. I didn't even know this happened. This looks insane to me, how all the fans are throwing all these bottles on the field. But after Couch spiked the ball, officials decided to review the Morgan catch, which the officials are not allowed to do, and they did it anyway. And the lead official, Terry McCauley, announced that the replay center buzzed down to the field prior to Couch spiking the ball. After review, they said that Morgan dropped the pass. That gave Jacksonville Jaguars the ball on downs, and then the loss dropped the Browns to 6-6, and they ended up missing the 2001 playoffs. How about the Dez catch, right? The Dez catch that was ruled incomplete. I think we have one of our own, right? The Calvin Johnson touchdown that wasn't a touchdown. I wonder if they even have that one in here. Well, they do have the Detroit Lions no call on Pettigrew when Pettigrew was interfered with. We'll never forget that one. Cowboys linebacker Anthony Hitchens never turned around to make a play on the ball, and then the only contact he made was marginal. It's usually called pass interference when a defender never turns his head. However, tight end Brandon Pettigrew held Hitchens' face mask during the route, so it should have been an offsetting penalty and a replay on a 3rd and 1. Instead, the down counted, and the Lions went on to punt on 4th down while leading 20-17 in the 4th quarter of the 2014 NFC wildcard game. That punt was terrible, and it only went 10 yards. Such our luck, right? The Cowboys responded with a 59-yard touchdown drive. Obviously, the Lions went on to lose 24-10. What else is in here? Man, there's a bunch of good ones in here. Kansas City's roughing the passer. Jones roughing the passer against none other than Tom Brady. How about the Tom Brady tuck rule? That's a big one. What else do we have in here? There's the Los Angeles Rams pass interference not called in the Super Bowl. There's a bunch of them in there. Anyway, I put it down in the chat so you guys can check it out later. There's a lot of good ones in here. Just thought I'd share that. That was a little last minute thing that I threw together today. Okay, so next up, let's talk some free agents. Right after I check the chat out. Yeah, Megatron getting robbed of that TD against the Bears. Yep, changed the rule following season. The Lions have had like 5 or 6 major rules changed. And there might be another one. You know, there might be another one this year. I don't know. I just think that if we're gonna have instant replay, like, why not use it? It's not slowing down the game that much. Especially if you have people, that are already reviewing these plays. It's a simple, just send the call down to the field. You put a ref up in the box that is capable of making the call, and everything has to be reviewed. Everything has to be on video. The ref reviewing the video has to be on video. Everything has to be reviewable. The one thing that I forgot to mention about what Florio was saying, just popped in my head, is there was no pool report at the end of that game. And had there been a pool report, get some sort of an explanation. I think it was Cleet Blakeman. I think it was owed to everybody. Why was there no pool report? That is something that is supposed to happen at the end of every game. It just obviously makes the NFL look even worse when they deny a pool report at the end of a game. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't sit with me very well. It just further drives fans to believe that this was just a setup from the very beginning. So, we got free agency trade and rumors we're going to get to in just a moment. The top 100 free agents. But Mike McCarthy, so big news came out, I believe it was last night. Mike McCarthy, well, Jones kind of really screwed him up, right? Didn't allow him to interview, and now he's not going to coach in the 2025 season. He's decided that he's going to focus on himself in 2025 and focus on coaching in 2026 should there be an opening. So I think it's kind of BS the way that this went down in Jerry World, that he didn't allow McCarthy to be interviewed, and then they ended up parting ways anyway. And it kind of set McCarthy back. He couldn't interview with all of these teams, and they were already making decisions. And, this clearly hindered Mike McCarthy's future as a coach. He's still going to get paid. I mean, I don't think he had a contract anymore in Dallas anyway, but I mean, the guy's paid. He'll do something. He'll do something this year. Maybe he'll sit, with one of the Fox crews or NBC or somebody and do some game analysis or play-by-play or whatever. He'll do something this year. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll just sit back and chill and do nothing. But it's just kind of devastating to the league when a coach of this magnitude is not in it, right? They're not given an opportunity to coach. Honestly, I think it's complete BS, and it's really disappointing. So free agency trade rumors, I'll get to that in just a moment. But there was a mailbag email that came in, and they sent me this link about Jaden Daniels. And I remember seeing something about this, but it kind of was like out of sight, out of mind. Did you guys know that Jaden Daniels uses virtual reality to train before games? And to him, he thinks that he's gaining a competitive edge. I didn't know that he thought that he was gaining a competitive edge by using virtual reality. I mean, I don't know. I've never used it, so I don't know how realistic it really is and what it could provide him. But as the article states, Washington Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels, let me skip some of that. Anyway, Daniels, who led the Commanders to the stunning 45-31 upset over our Detroit Lions, has made a name for himself with this innovative approach to preparation. In that game, Daniels passed for 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, and propelled Washington to the NFC Championship game. But what sets Daniels apart from other quarterbacks is his commitment to the VR training. Every morning he starts at 6 a.m., not on the football field, but with the VR system, using a German translator or German simulator developed by some company. The Daniels is placed into very specific, tailor-made game scenarios known as immersive decision-making training. These VR simulations replicate real-life stadiums and plays, allowing him to react under intense pressure. Quote, Daniel says, it's like real life. He says, they load in the stadium you're playing in. I'll get 7 rounds or 7 seconds to throw to know the play. What's even more impressive, per this article, is that Daniels trains at 1.75 speed. So he's sped it up 75% in the VR environment, which helps him read defenses, I guess, 80% faster, according to Daniels. This gives him a significant advantage in actual games, as everything feels slower and more predictable once he steps onto the field. Now, Daniels had this quote. He said, when you're in VR, it moves faster than human beings. Once you get out there, everything slows down. I know this is coming. I've seen this before, is what he said, end quote. I think it's interesting. Now, we've seen these games. You know, Madden, it's really made significant jumps. But VR, which I've never used, I'm considering getting one now just to see what it's all about. I guess it does make sense. When you're seeing things at a much faster rate and you're kind of training your brain to see the same thing that you're doing anyway, and you're training your brain to process it faster, and then you get on the field and it's a little bit slower. I mean, even a couple of tenths slower processing time or faster processing time, making it appear slower, obviously could help him. It could help any quarterback. It's kind of interesting. I think it's very interesting. And maybe we'll see this, you know, introduced league wide, or we'll hear from it, you know, hear from other quarterbacks doing the same thing. Bob W. says, supposedly one of the traits of high-level professional athletes is the ability to envision what they want to accomplish. And golfers claim it's a big deal. You know, we've heard Aiden Hutchinson talk about manifestation. And I know he says it's part of a religion or religious practice or whatever. I don't know which one that is. It's interesting that, yeah, if you speak things into existence, if you talk about something, if you have, you know, positive feedback to yourself, right? Positive self-talk. It's just part of a daily routine for a lot of people. I mean, I used to do it daily within my sales practices. It's always positive self-talk and motivating yourself to, you know, see the goal, be the goal, do the goal, and get beyond the goal. And I guess it makes perfect sense. If you're constantly telling yourself you're going to do something, at some point you're going to do it. If you're constantly telling yourself you're going to beat this goal, at some point you're going to beat it. So if you same said the other way, if you're telling yourself, man, I don't think I'm as good as this other guy, I don't think I'm ever going to get there, you're probably not. Just because you've already put that doubt, you've already seeded that doubt, it's not going to happen. It's interesting though. I think it's interesting. All of it is. I saw there was a rumor going around about the Super Bowl 60 logo that was released. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but from what I know, I'll share it with you, even though this is not legit. It can't be legit. There's no way. I'll explain why in just a second. Okay, so there's this supposed Super Bowl LIX logo that's blue and silver, and that definitely looks like the Ambassador Bridge. And I can't tell what building that is right there in the middle, but that does look like a building in Detroit. Can't tell, but that bridge definitely looks like what could be the Ambassador Bridge. Now, the reason why I'm going to say that this is not legit is because the Super Bowl logo usually doesn't come out until after the Super Bowl from this season has been played and finished. And it usually comes out in the coming days after that. So, kind of interesting that, you know, people are trying to inject the Lions into the Super Bowl for this season. Hey, if it's blue at all, we have a chance. But there's a lot of blue teams in the NFL. If you believe into the whole hype of, you know, the red logo for this year, meaning that the Chiefs were going to find their way back into the Super Bowl. Okay, let's see. Free agency trade rumors. We're almost there. So a lot of free agency trade rumors being floated right now. There's 15 trade candidates that have already started for this 2025 season that's coming upon us here very, very soon. Deebo Samuel. So 49ers list of free agents for 2025 and 26 include Brock Purdy, George Kittle, John Hargrave, Drake Greenlaw, who I'm going to talk about in a moment, Juwan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk, Charvarius Ward, and Deebo Samuel. The simple answer is that the general manager, John Lynch, won't be able to retain all of those players, nor would it be wise to. So that leaves Samuel as an obvious man out, it would appear, according to this article. So he's an option. Not so much for the Lions, but he's an option. Of course, Kirk Cousins, most likely going to find himself a new team. DK Metcalf from the Seahawks probably isn't going to stick around. You know, obviously with the Seattle possibly in somewhat of a rebuild, quasi-rebuild. DK Metcalf may be the odd man out in this situation. Deshaun Watson, I could care less. Garrett Wilson from the Jets. Look, there's a new sheriff in town with Aaron Glenn and a new GM with Muji. So there's a great possibility here that they may want to introduce some new athletes to this team. Aaron Glenn may want to bring some athletes, some playmakers from Detroit. You know, some of the free agents that Detroit may lose. He may want to bring some familiar faces into the building with him. One, to make it feel more like home, but two, he's going to want guys that know what he wants done and knows the type of example that needs to be set. So I would not be surprised if a couple of Lions free agents actually end up in Chicago and or New York. And I wouldn't be mad at them, not one bit. So Garrett Wilson from the Jets, you know, kind of where there's smoke, there's fire, and plenty is billowing around Wilson and the Jets entering this offseason with only 1 year left on his rookie deal. It seems as if, you know, either the Jets need to extend him, he might sit, or they could elect to trade him. And that's exactly why, you know, I'm reading that from this article. It's exactly why I did the video or the live stream the other day talking about Kirby Joseph. Whenever a player's in the last year of your deal or their deal, you've got two choices, maybe three. Play them, then they sit, or extend them, and then they play. That's really it. Those are the options that you have. Now, if a player decides to play in his last year of his contract, well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you have a really good year, if Kirby would have had this last season in his final year, he could have commanded any dollar amount that he wanted. But said the other way, had he gotten injured, and now he's not worth anything or very little. So that's why he's not going to go into his last season making a few $1,000,000 when he knows that he's worth at least 10 to 12 more million per season. George Pickens, Pittsburgh Steelers. Would Pittsburgh really want to trade him? Probably not. I mean, he's their best offensive player. Same could be said for Garrett Wilson. And then you got Derek Carr. I could really care less where he ends up. I mean, I think that he's just kind of washed up, honestly. He may end up somewhere, may not. And then you got linebacker Quay Walker for the Green Bay Packers. Honestly, I don't know where he would go. He has not been great as far as a PFF score. I think he's hovered around a 60, which is not great, especially where he was taken. He's dealt with a lot of injuries and penalties, obviously, that has hurt his team. I don't know. I feel like if the Packers were smart, that they would probably move on from him. Sam Hubbard from the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is one guy that I am going to talk about when we get to edge rushers. Sam Hubbard is a guy that I do like that could potentially end up on the Detroit Lions this season. But I'm not going to break into that today. He has 1 year left on his $40 million deal. The Bengals could very easily trade him in pursuit of upgrades next to Hendrickson, which obviously I don't think they're going to get rid of Hendrickson. But he had a 90.4 pass rush grade. And he does have some continuity, right, with DJ Reader. So could there be a trade where you send Kirby and you bring in Sam? Possibly. Or is Brad just looking in to bring in some good ball players and Sam kind of fits that mold? Mozzie Smith, Dallas Cowboys. This one I found interesting. Mozzie Smith was on my radar for that year's draft. I think it was 2 seasons ago now. And he just hasn't done anything. He has not had a great career yet. Maybe it's the coaching. Maybe it's the style of the defense. Maybe it's just him. But Mozzie definitely would benefit from some new surroundings. So I would expect for him to probably get moved on. Tyrann Mathieu, I'm surprised he's even going to consider playing, much longer, but he's going to be up for grabs more than likely. And then Evan Neal, tackle from the New York Giants. Possibility he could get moved on. And then guard Kenyon Green out of Houston Texans. And that's really it. That's your top 15 free agent candidate report right now. Yeah, speaking about AG, I don't know why this thing is so small. I can't. There we go. Now I can read the chat. Speaking of AG, yes. So AG is considered to be doing some shopping in Detroit. And I'm not talking about, down Woodward or wherever else. Honestly, I don't even know where all the shops are in Detroit. There's one thing that I've never done is I've never shopped in Detroit, ever. I've shopped in Chicago plenty, never in Detroit. Outside of restaurants anyway. So talking about AG, now that you brought him up, Aaron Glenn is potentially going to be shopping or shoplifting in Allen Park. What are we talking about? So according to this article by John Macaroon, he says that Aaron Glenn is planning to target several Lions free agents. Derek Barnes was at the top of the list. Who else did he have on this list? Where's it at? Where's the rest of the guys here? Okay, I don't know where the rest of the players are. But anyway, Derek Barnes, Ifeatu Melifonwu was another one. Carlton Davis, Marcus Davenport, and, of course, Derek Barnes. So that's your four. Look, I'm not afraid of losing Iffy. He's a free agent. He's battled a lot of injury. He's been good and then not so good. So I think that he's just a player that needs a little bit more development, but he's got to stay healthy. Davenport, look, I would love to see Davenport come back. I really would. I don't think it's going to be extremely expensive to keep him around, number one. And number two, if anything, he could become a rotational player if the Lions go out and do the right thing and get another top-tier defensive end, either in the draft or a better top second-tier defensive end in free agency, and then you bring in Marcus Davenport, and then you have plenty of rotation. Josh Paschal was good in spurts, but he was not consistent as an edge rusher. He was good, just not consistent. He was better at, at stopping the run off the edge than he was doing anything else. So I still think that the Lions are going to address that. And Marcus Davenport was a perfect complement in the very beginning. Freak injury that was kind of forced by Paris Johnson. He may not have been injured the entire season had Paris Johnson not did that to his arm. Like I said about safety, Ifeatu Melifonwu, again, he may be a perfect fit in the Jets. I'm not sorry to see him go. Derek Barnes, I'm not afraid if he walks either, to be honest with you. And I'm going to tell you why in just a moment, because I do think that our linebacker room is probably the biggest problem that we're facing right now, headed into free agency. Bob W says Davenport can set the edge. And see, that's a big key, right? When you have a defensive end, you need him to do one of two things. Get the quarterback. Well, three things. Get the quarterback, contain and set the edge. And Davenport sets the edge, probably one of the best to do it in the league. He really is, especially if you go watch his tape. He doesn't get too deep. He closes down when he needs to close down, but he stays in position to make a play. Nobody's going to get outside him unless it's like a Jaden Daniels that's got some extreme speed under his feet. And that's where you're hoping that your linebacker and your safety behind you is in the right spot. So let's talk about the linebackers for just a moment. This was going to be hour 2 of this morning's program. So what I'm going to try to do, and I'm going to experiment, so you guys are just going to have to bear with me. I'm going to do some experiments now that we're in the off season, is I want to do the podcast in a couple of different formats. So in the morning, I want to do hour 1. It'll be all of the NFL breaking news, NFL news, and other topics. And then obviously hour 2, we'll get into more of the Lions news. Breaking news will always be first in the first hour. And then subject matter that I want to talk about, whether it's the offseason or other news that is happening. And I'm going to try to do it in 2 different live streams. So there'll be a trailer that you're going to have to go to as a redirect. So when the first hour ends, the second hour will begin, and you just go to the redirect. It's funny that it happened the other day. It was not supposed to happen. I didn't have anything set up. But whatever happened, it happened. And then that just made me think, you know what? I just got to get that done. I got to figure it out, make it happen. So that way we don't have a 2-hour podcast that, you know, less people will listen to a 2-hour podcast. More people will listen to an hour podcast. It's just the nature of the beast. Cruising, what's happening? Lions Blood 89 says, I would love for Brad Holmes to draft linebacker Jihad Campbell from Alabama. He also played edge. And you know how the Lions love versatility. Yeah. I don't know enough about Campbell. I think I mentioned him the other day. And he's intriguing, but I haven't done enough tape work on him. So the guys that I'm going to talk about right now are just the free agents that are on the market. That's it. So just the free agents that are on the market. And I'm going to explain myself in just a moment. Let me just get it set up here. Okay. I need to figure out these new earphones too, because this cord is bothering me. I think I'm just going to have to get wireless. Okay, so when we look at the Detroit Lions free agents, I'm starting with linebacker today, and it's simply because when I was looking at their contracts, I was a little bit in awe with the situation that we're facing. Number one, starting off the top with Alex Anzalone. Now, the Lions are up against the clock with Alex, who is entering his final season under contract. Now, this past season, or this next season, Anzalone is going to make... Man, they did this one right. He's going to make 1.15. Is that what I'm seeing? This can't be right. This can't be right. Hold on here. Spotrac Premium is not making me feel very comfortable in their numbers because he signed an $18 million deal. It was 3 years, 18 mil. And they're saying that in 2025, he's going to get about 3.8 million. That doesn't seem right. Be that as it may, let's just say Alex is getting 6 million this year. This is his final year. Are the Lions going to re-extend him? I don't know. I kind of don't think so. Is there a possibility that he gets traded to the Jets? I wouldn't think that either. But I would leave the door open, especially if Aaron Glenn is willing to overpay. I don't want Alex gone. I'm just talking to talk. We're just having the conversation. The next guy, Jalen Reeves-Maybin. He is also entering the final year of his contract. He came off a nasty injury. He was able to get in at the tail end of the season. Now his contract, let's just hope this is right. Let me open this one. Now he's set to make, I don't know why this one is correct. He's set to make $4.75 million this year. 4.75. I'm sorry. Alex Anzalone, that was actually Malcolm Rodriguez's contract. I don't know why that one showed up. All thumbs yesterday. Alex is making 7.3 this year, and Jalen is making 4.8, we'll call it. So 7.3 and 4.8. It's big numbers, but maybe not big enough when we talk about the guys that we're going to get into in just a moment. And then Malcolm, the guy that I just mentioned a moment ago, he is battling a torn ACL since Thanksgiving. He's typically a 9 to 12 month recovery process. And for Malcolm, that puts him either in training camp, possibly, or returning probably sometime in December. End of November, early December. Clearly, the Lions cannot wait till cut day, in August to find out that Malcolm is either not ready or won't be ready for a few months. I think that with him also entering in the final year of his contract, the Lions have some very big decisions. This is why we have the weakest linebacker room right now. It's not so much of the players, it's the contracts. We don't have anybody in 2026. We have Ben Nyman. He's an unrestricted free agent. Trevor Nowaski, he's an exclusive rights free agent. And then we signed Deron Gilbert and Abraham Beauplan to futures deals. That's the extent of your linebacker room. Not very sexy, right? Not real appealing. So obviously there's a few guys that have come to mind when I looked at the top free agents list for this season in the NFL. Who would make sense, right? Which guys would make the most sense to come to Detroit? Of course, you have to weigh in how much money are they going to make, number one. Number two, are they good at coverage? Because that has been the Lions' Achilles heel in the linebacker room, is our coverage ability has been terrible. So I think that the first and foremost thing that the Lions need to do is find good cover linebackers. Jack can be a thumper, right? He's going to be a guy that's going to try to get after the run game. He's going to play the middle of the field. You can always back him up with a safety if the Lions change their defense a little bit. But the guys on the outside, right, their outside linebackers at the Will and the Sam, those guys need to step up big time in covering these tight ends and running backs and even some, slot receivers from time to time. So we need coverage linebackers, especially in a scheme where we are relying heavily on our linebackers to do a lot of work. So for me, it's simple. Dre Greenlaw. He is available. He's going to be 28 years old in 2025. He worked his way back from Achilles injury. That's what makes him attractive to Brad Holmes. It's the injury train. He suffered it obviously in the Super Bowl last February, and then he was shut down in 2024 after just 34 snaps. So he will likely see a lot of interest in free agency. He excels in coverage, or he did excel in coverage, having earned an average PFF grade for coverage of an 82.6 and a 79.5 over the last two seasons. So he is somebody to keep your eye on for one reason is I think that his contract is going to be affordable. I think that he would be willing to sign a one-year deal because he is coming back from this injury, and last season he wasn't playing. So I think for that reason alone, you get him at a $6 million contract this season. I think that's a huge upgrade. It also adds, some depth to this linebacker room, but he should be a starter as an outside linebacker. He should, and he can rush the passer. So I think that that's a good opportunity. He's obviously in that. He's not in the injury bucket anymore because he'll be 2 seasons outside of that ACL or Achilles that he suffered. So he's not in that injury bucket. But I think that injury is what's going to drive his contract down because of the way that the 49ers treated it last year. So next up would be Zach Bond. Now, I like Zach Bond, but clearly he's on a Super Bowl team right now. He'll be 28 years old in 2025. Now, the Eagles bought very low on Zach Bond, very talented, but underutilized off-ball linebacker who has now had a pretty amazing career in Philadelphia. Now, he may be one of the best linebackers in coverage in the entire NFL. I think he is in the game right now, probably the best coverage linebacker. He was underutilized in the pass rush department. That's okay. But those qualities still do reside in Zach Bond. Initial valuations have him listed as probably a 3-year, $40 million deal with $26.5 million guaranteed. So that puts him in that, $12 to $14 million a year range. That is a lot more appealing and appetizing to me than spending $25 million on an edge rusher. You get an off-ball linebacker that can cover, that can stick around for a few seasons, that can also rush the passer. And oh, by the way, he's really good, in the run game too. But his season grade so far in 2024 was first in the linebacker room, 90.2. 90.2. So really, really good season so far for Zach Bond. And at 28 years old, he's probably hitting the prime right now or in the middle of the prime of his career. Let's see here. Detroit Lions bad guy. You must be really behind on the stream, yeah? Okay. So talking about affordable, I saw the question in here. We need Super Bowl or, we want a Super Bowl or do we want to be regular season Warriors? So you can't have 6 starting quality linebackers. You can't. You can't afford it. Nobody can afford it. Not any team can afford it. So when you look at the linebacker room, right now, who's our starters? We have Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone. Malcolm Rodriguez is not going to be ready. Ben Nyman, he's a backup. Trevor Nowaski, he's a backup. Deron Gilbert and Abraham Beauplan, they did not excite me this year. Those are good depth pieces. Bring them into training camp. Let them fight it out. But we still need another high-quality starter that can be with this team for the upcoming seasons. Zach Bond fits that. You're going to have to spend a little bit of money. But if you spend it on the right guy, then it'll all trade off, with how he reacts on the field, right? The type of work that he puts in. But then I found this other guy. And this guy, his PFF grades have been very consistent. His play on the field's been pretty consistent. And I feel that maybe he hasn't had the best opportunity to shine because of the team that he's been with. And this gentleman's name is Jamian Sherwood. Now, he's going to be 25 in 2025. Now, this is a Aaron Glenn type of guy, so I don't know that Aaron Glenn is going to want to let this guy up. But Sherwood kind of burst onto the scene as a full-time, into a full-time role as injuries began to really hamper the Jets this season. Veteran C.J. Mosley obviously was one of them. Sherwood played with kind of this hair-on-fire playing style, very similar to Quincy Williams. And in his emergence as a safety turned into linebacker convert was a rare bright spot, for the Jets last season. Very disappointing defense. Obviously, I think that we would want to see nothing more than for a former safety turned linebacker find his way onto this Detroit Lions roster. And the reason why I say that is he knows how to cover. He knows how to get after the ball. And I think that his vision is going to be a little bit more appealing. Outside linebackers where I see him playing, obviously, the only downside is his coverage may be lacking a bit as a linebacker since he's made the transition. He's still learning a little bit, but his age is intriguing at 25. The cost is very intriguing. He does have starter ability and quality. And I think that once you put him with a Calvin Shepard, as a DC and Casey Rogers, that he's probably going to excel, at where he maybe hasn't been able to with the Jets. He's probably a 2-year, $7.5 to $8 million a year guy. So you're talking a 16, to $22 million commitment. You have him for 2 to 3 seasons. He's been in the mid 70s for a PFF grade. He's still very young at 25. And so he is somebody that when I looked at all of the free agents that are available right now today, or who will be available, these are the only 3 that I found that even make any sort of sense. Anything beyond these 3 is going to require a trade, right? And I think that I haven't identified these players yet as far as who could we trade for. But these guys you're going to be able to sign once the new league year hits. And if their respective teams right now have not done anything to lock them up, these to me make the most sense. So you kind of have 3 different versions of a linebacker here. You have Dre Greenlaw that does, just about everything, right? He's 28 years old. He's going to be, low on the totem pole as far as price range. I think right now he's probably a $6 to $8 million a year guy in a 1-year deal. Zach Bond, I think he's the elite of the 3 who can do a little bit of everything. And he's a 90 season grade, great in coverage. Obviously a thumper, a leader, somebody that I would love to see on the field next to Alex Anzalone. But he's going to be in that $13 to $14 million a year range. Are you willing to spend that kind of money? If you're not going to re-up Alex Anzalone, then I think the answer is yes. And then obviously Jamian Sherwood. Again, this is a guy that is more low risk, higher reward because he still has a lot to prove. And I think that his growth has been tremendous already. That's really all I had for you for the linebackers today. Obviously, going back to what I said, about our linebacker group, Alex, Jalen, and Malcolm are all in their final year. Malcolm's probably not going to play this season, and if he does, it's not going to be till way late. I hope he gets back. But it's one of those things where coming back off an injury like this, you just don't know when they're going to be to them old self. When are they going to be able to play to the level that they were? I've never been high on Jalen Reeves-Maben. I know he's great at special teams, but to your point in the chat, to some of you that have said we need Super Bowl caliber type players, to me, Jalen is not that. He may be a good leader. He may be a good vocal guy. But for me, we need some proven playmakers that can come onto this team that aren't going to cost us an arm and a leg. And you're paying Jalen $4.8 million this year. I'd rather trade that off to somebody else and bring in a guy like Jamie Sherwood, right around the same price. Or I'd rather trade Jalen to the Jets and bring in Zach Bond. Yeah, you might spend an extra $7-8 million on that deal, but you're getting a proven commodity in a Zach Bond. Those are the types of players that I would love to see. The Jamie Sherwoods, I think, that can really develop and be solid rotational guys that will surprise us when the time comes. So that's my linebacker wrap up for this week. I'll get into tradables, guys that we could trade for, and then obviously the college prospects. We'll get into some of that next week. That's going to be the theme as far as each week we'll do a positional group or two, and then we'll follow it up with what's coming up in the draft. Let's see. Reactions to this in the comments below, obviously in the chat. Walter Football, according to Warren King, has Bond listed as the number 5 free agent available out of the whole list. What is FWIW? FWIW. I don't know what that means. Jay Cruzen, has Brad ever spent big money on splash players? The answer is no. Now, he spent $15 million on Carlton. He spent $30 million, I think it was, on DJ Reader. Or maybe it was $22 million on DJ Reader, had the opportunity to turn into $15 million a year. So the answer is no. But I don't think that he's afraid to spend, that $13 to $15 million range. Absolutely. Even probably $18 million. I just don't think he's looking to spend the 20s, the 25s, the 28s, and the $30 million. You could get 3 players for that price. 3 really good players. I mean, just look at the list that I just put together. If you spent $25 million, you could bring in Zach Bond, Jamie Sherwood, and that would cost you $20 million. And then if you worked out a deal with Dre Greenlaw, you're looking at $26 million for all 3 of them. For one edge rusher, you could have 3 brand new linebackers that are all really good. And you're set, especially with Alex Anzalone and Jalen. I mean, that would be a pretty intense linebacker group. What players will be available in the first round? I'm going to get into that more so next week. I'll do some of that stuff tomorrow too. We'll be looking at some of the college players. As far as Greenlaw going back to San Francisco, I don't know. I mean, why did they shut him down? They didn't let him play. There's got to be a reason for it. Nick Bolton, he was also on my list, Warren. But the problem with Nick Bolton is his coverage ability is terrible, and he's going to command a boatload of money. I think he's going to command more than Zach Bond will. At least my initial thinking is. And I think that Zach Bond is way better than Nick Bolton, to be honest with you. To be totally honest with you. Let's see here. No, Greenlaw didn't lose his spot. He was literally shut down. He didn't play at all. He was shut down. After 34 snaps, he was done. He didn't play the rest of the season. I'm not high on Ezekiel Turner, Mr. Morale. Zeke is so raw, and he proved it this last season. He bit on every play action, and it was killing us left and right. I am not sold on Zeke at all. I'm really not. Let him fight it out in training camp, but I don't think that he'll be able to make the cut. J-Rod, can you share ahead of time in Voxer? Oh, for what it's worth. I got you. J-Rod, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you want me to share in Voxer? I guess let me know in Voxer what you want me to share. All right, so let me see what I got for the rest of this show. This is going to be, it's not going to be a full 2 hours. Obviously, it's a late afternoon show. Free agents that might be back. So we've already heard a little bit about Aaron Glenn doing a little bit of shopping in Detroit. The question is anybody going to follow Ben to Chicago? I don't know. There's a report here that says that there could be a few players that might follow Ben to Chicago. And I was was kind of taken aback at some of these names. Like, I just don't see the fit, to be honest with you. Offensive tackle Dan Skipper. I mean, is this a joke? I don't think Dan Skipper is going to follow Ben, especially to Chicago. I don't know that Dan Skipper makes, the roster in Detroit this year. He made it for the first time last year. He could. I think he had a pretty solid season. I think Dan will be back as long as the Lions want him back. And then wide receiver Tim Patrick, I think that would be a huge loss for the Lions if they're not bringing in Tim Patrick back. And last I checked, I don't think Tim Patrick is a free agent. I thought that when we signed him, he had 2 years left on his deal. Let me take a look at my sheet. I got it over here somewhere. Okay, let's see. Lions free agent. So, yeah, Tim Patrick is listed as an unrestricted free agent. That is interesting. I could have sworn that he had 2 years left on his deal. Well, there's a possibility he's gone. Now, he had, 44 targets on the season. Caught 33 balls, 394 yards, 3 TDs, 65 PFF grade. It's not a bad year for, a guy that has to slot in as the third and fourth option. And quite honestly, it's more like the fifth and sixth option at times in this offense. So that's not bad. As long as he wants a, fairly decent deal that is more cap friendly than not, I think he'll be back. This one really blew me away. So offensive guard Kevin Zeitler. Now we know that he is obviously a free agent. He's getting up towards the end of his career. I could not see Zeitler moving on to another team. I think that he's going to want to end his career here in Detroit. He's getting up there in age. There was talks that he was even going to retire before he joined the Lions last season. It's just all about how much money he wants. He was one of the best guards, if not the best guard in the league this year. I don't think the Lions are going to let him go, without a doubt. I think that you have to try to keep him. Let's see. Where's the rest of my list? So players that might follow Aaron Glenn, right? Guys that might head off. We've talked about the guys that might follow Ben. We've talked about, what about the guys that might come back? So this list that was compiled, 19 free agents that should be back in Detroit in 2025. Now these obviously are not the same as the ones that we just read, as far as they contradict each other. So some of these writers, they see things vastly different. Now I'm going to give you my opinion based on, the guys that I see that should be back, or I'm hoping to be back. And the first one is none other than Kevin Zeitler. I already gave you my reasoning on him. I don't think that he's going to want to go to another team. Levi Onwuzurike, great comeback for him this season. He's going to need a contract. So what is he willing to take? Does he want to move on to a different team? There may not be as much of a long leash, if you will, for Levi to do what he did, within the confines of Allen Park. He got himself back to health, was able to play this entire season. He feels probably the best that he's felt in a long time. Obviously, he owes Detroit for, allowing him to do that. They could have cut him. They could have given him an injury settlement and been done. They didn't. I don't think that Levi is not going to be back. I think he will be back. And then Ifeatu Melifonwu, this is one that I'm 50-50 on. I think that if something happens with Kirby Joseph, a deal doesn't get done or a trade happens, then Iffy will be back. But if Kirby stays, I think that Melly Mel is going to be gone. Derek Barnes, again, I'm not sold on Derek. Matter of fact, I'm not so sure that he would be back. I think that he could be one that could end up as a Jet more so than a Bear. I think that he could end up with Aaron Glenn. Dan Skipper, I already spoke about him. Pat O'Connor, I think without a doubt you have to bring him back, at least as a depth guy. Now, he was thrown in as a starter. I don't think that he belonged as a starter, but he definitely played very commendable throughout the season. And to be honest with you, I think that his hard-nosed playing style is exactly why we need to bring him back. He really shined at moments. Ben Nyman, this is a guy that I wanted to make the roster last year, and I'm glad that he did. So Ben Nyman, I think that you have to bring him back. Again, I think that he's a guy that gives you some more versatility, but special teams he's really good at. And, doing what he had to do this season with all the injuries that we had. Again, I think that he had a very commendable season, but sometimes there's just too many injuries. And some of these guys that are not meant to be starters rely on, a few more guys to be in the game. But I think that Ben deserves another shot. Craig Reynolds, he's got to be back. Has to be. Kindle Vildor, you're going to hate me for this, but I wanted him back this last season. I thought that he does way more positive than negative, and I think he did that this season as well. I think that he was one of the better backups that we had. He's a depth guy. He's not a starter. As long as our starters stay in the game, he stays out of the game. But I do like him for his experience and his ability as a depth player. I'd like to see him back at least in camp. Coyote Iwasaka, sayonara. I think that the time has run out. This offensive line has to get better. Mahogany and Manu have to take big steps up, this season. Mahogany obviously played wonderfully this year, but we need some guys that can start. And I'm not so positive that Iwasaka can do that. He had one decent game in the NFC Championship, but hasn't been enough to even play a little bit this last season. Khalil Dorsey, I think that Dan would probably want to bring him back, and there's probably room on the 90 man, but I'm not so sure about the 53. I don't think that Khalil Dorsey makes the 53 this year. Trevor Nowaski, you have to bring this guy back. That's a must. Some other guys that I would love to see back. Miles Adams, I think that there's room here for him. I think that he was impressive enough and just needs more development. I think that him spending a few weeks with Terrell Williams helped him immensely. I would love to see him back. Anthony Pittman, look, he didn't make the team and he was gone for a reason. I think he stays gone. Jonah Williams, I think that we want to see this guy back in camp. I really do. I think that he gave us some flexibility on the defensive line. He also performed when he was asked to perform. And again, I think that at some point, these guys that are relying upon some good, solid players around them that they didn't have, his play lacked at time. But he didn't get enough snaps, for us to really get an amazing long look at him. I think that he'll be back for training camp. Connor Galvin, I don't think that he'll be back. Shane Zielstra, he was cut last season. And I was very surprised. Very, very surprised. I definitely see him coming back. I was shocked last year that he was cut. Kyle Picot must be back. Must be back. Mitchell Agudi, he was good in spurts too. I think that Aaron Glenn had him going in too many different directions. Just put him where he belongs and let him do what he does. So I'd like to see him back. Other players that we haven't really spoken about yet. Carlton Davis, depends on what he wants. But I want to see him back. John Kaminsky, I think his time has come and gone, but for some reason, I think Dan Campbell is going to give him a shot. Marcus Davenport must be back. Al-Qadim Muhammad must be back. Emmanuel Mosley, see you later, bye. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's gone. Teddy B, we know he's coaching football in high school. Outside of that, there's really no one else to talk about. I think that's the list. Yeah, better the hunt. Randy says Tim Patrick is a blocking machine for runners and on, for others, for other receivers. I think that's great that he does well at that. And we need that, right? Without the blocking, our offense doesn't work the way that it does. Kobe Sorsdal, yeah, I'm not impressed. Al-Qadim Muhammad, I think he has to be back. So in the comments below, you guys let me know. I'll only drop this into the chat here. Here's an article that you guys can reference later. Kind of gives you a good picture of who's, what this guy's thinking, who Mike Payton. It's Mike Payton's from yesterday. So we've talked free agents. We've talked a little bit of linebacker room, guys that should be back. Potential guys that Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson might be poaching away from the Lions. I've got a few more topics here that I'm going to save for tomorrow that Riley put together. But at the end of the day, look, the scenery is going to look very different in Allen Park this year. It just will. And I think to, some of your points in the chat, it's also my point to believe that we do have to go after a certain type of athlete this year. Brad can't rely on these very, very, very low risk, high reward players. I think you can have one or two. I don't think you can have 5 or 6. Let's stay away from the injury guys as much as we can. Now, if they're a couple years post an injury, that's a different story. But if they're fresh off an injury, I don't want anything to do with them. Brad, for some reason, does. I think in the draft, you can't, in the draft, you can't make those mistakes anymore. You can't make the mistake of knowing that you just got a first-round player, had he not been injured, and he got him in the 3rd round, but he never pans out. Those are the types of guys we can't take a risk on. I would much rather see us move around in the draft. If there's really nobody that Brad likes that fit the team, then move around, gain some more picks. But let's not take a flyer on somebody this year. I think that this is the year that they definitely have to go all in, but that doesn't mean spending, big money on edge rushers and outside free agents. The second tier guys, the 10 to 15 to 16 million dollar a year guys, I'm good with those all day. The second and third tier guys that, are probably making somewhere between, 6 and 10 million, 6 and 11 million. I'm good with those guys. Now, last year I wanted AJ Epinesa. I'm curious, how did AJ Epinesa do this year? I never looked. I'm curious. Because he was a 50%er guy. I mean, he was a guy that was, more of a rotational player. His overall grade is terrible. Let me see premium stats here. Well, hey, he ended up with 6 sacks. That's not terrible. 22 pressures on the season. What is going on with this key? Can't read it. I mean, so not a great season. It's good for 6 sacks, but again, how much did he play? That's what I need to see. He only played 784 snaps this season. And let's see, the defense. Come on. Give me the number. It would appear that the defense had right around 1,200 snaps. So he played in about 60%. So again, he was more of a rotational player. Getting 6 sacks out of a rotational player is pretty damn good. Especially if your other rotational player is better than him. Like if you had AJ Epinesa backing up Zadarius Smith or AJ Epinesa backing up Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, I think the trade-off is great. Aiden goes and gets 15. Zadarius gets 8 or 9. AJ gets 6 or 7. I mean, what more can you ask for? Right? I think that's a great trade-off that your rotational guy is getting 6, maybe 7 sacks a year. As long as the guy in front of you is getting 6, 7, 8, 9 sacks, I think that helps. Not that sacks mean everything. It's just one of the measurements how we look at these guys from a production standpoint. Most important is just to do their damn job. That's the most important thing. Just don't let these guys get outside you. So, all right, that's it for today. We'll be back in the morning. I apologize about the internet issues, but I think we're okay. I haven't seen any drop frames. I'm hoping that the picture quality is good. I had to make a lot of changes today. Hopefully the audio is not clipping. I'll go back and listen to it here in just a moment. We are almost to the next milestone, which is 8,500 subscribers. Do me a favor and subscribe to the channel right now if you're new. Obviously, if you're new, you probably haven't listened to a ton of content, but we definitely try to give you the truth, the transparency, the honest takes and opinions, and we do a ton of research. So a ton of research to give you a lot of facts, not just a bunch of blowhard hot takes. It's going to be fact-driven media to give you the insights that you need, want, and deserve. And then obviously we're going to be doing some collaborations with a lot of different channels. I just set up an NFC roundtable today, and we're going to be doing it for this next season. And we're going to be doing a season wrap-up with a few other channels jumping in here in probably a week or so. We'll be doing the full season wrap-up. Maybe it's after the Super Bowl that we do it, where we're going to talk about the NFC North and what's next. So we'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow at 8 a.m., assuming everything is going well in the internet land. And if it's not, just check out the community tab. And if there's a post that says delayed or off, then you know the reason why. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Go and Pride. Go Detroit Lions. Bye-bye.